I'm just going to jump into this.
Of course.
My name's Krys. I'm also an agent in Southern California. I know a handful of you guys from the Tom Ferry ecosystem, a handful of you guys just from the marketplace. I've been in the business since 2018. Before I got into the business, I was an attorney by trade. I still have my license, but I don't use it anymore. And most recently, which is I think part of the reason why I'm here today, is I successfully climbed Mount Everest just a few months back. And when I climbed it, I really didn't expect there to be so many parallels between climbing and the business or real estate specifically. But I think, as a lot of you guys probably know, there are so many parallels between anything in our life that is really challenging and the business, because the business can provide us, so many obstacles to overcome. So what I have for us today, other than some war stories, is 3 lessons that I sort of took away from Mount Everest that I'm applying to my business and that I'm trying to get my team to apply to their business to keep the needle moving forward. And before we really jump into the weeds, I want to share with you guys that I'm really impressed by this group. And I know there's like a variety of different agents and where they are in the business, but the reality is anybody that shows up on a Thursday morning or anybody that is like really showing up is doing something right in the business. So I don't think anything I'm going to share with you today is completely enlightening or you're going to have an epiphany. But for like the Nazars and the Matts and the Christinas and the Roberts, all these people that I know are selling houses, the goal is to try to get 1% better. And I think if we can approach this lesson and anything that we're doing every single day with the goal of just trying to move the needle 1%, then you can really walk away with a lot, because you're not looking for a breakthrough. You're just looking for one thing.
You want a new client?
Next.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, let's jump into this. Measurable goals. So the first lesson that I'm starting with is something that you guys are probably familiar with. And what's popular about this idea of measurable goals is that everybody says get focused on a goal, get laser focused on a goal. But what I think they really mean is to be super clear on what exactly that goal is. And when I say super clear, I mean identifying exactly what it is that is measurable and making that your goal. So when I think about my goal, and the most recent one was climbing Mount Everest, I never had the intent to just climb a big mountain. I had the specific intent of climbing Mount Everest. And before I sort of take you to like what happened when I was on the mountain, I'll take you to why I set that goal or how I set that goal. So when I was 21 years old, I was in my dorm room in Washington, D.C., and I was brainstorming with my buddies what I could do for the next 6 months before starting law school. I was graduating early. I was trying to figure out what to do in the downtime, and totally joking, one of them said, "What about Mount Everest?" And I know she was joking, but for whatever reason, it resonated with me. The same way that I have to believe there is something in the business that really resonates inside you. And the chances are whatever that resonation is not money. It's something that is bigger than that. And what I need you to have in the background of whatever the goal is that if it's not causing you to feel a certain way inside you, you probably need to re-identify that goal. You probably need to figure out what exactly it is, because certain things I think are ineffable. Certain things are hard to describe, but they provoke a certain feeling inside your heart. So if something you have in the business or otherwise that is measurable isn't sort of giving you this like tug at the heartstring, I urge you to look at that goal again. But I come back to my story. She mentions Mount Everest. I have no experience climbing, but for whatever reason, it was kind of sexy. It was kind of appealing. And I said, let's learn more about this. So I graduate college early and I take a trip to Nepal, where I took a 4-week trek from a village called Jiri all the way to Everest Base Camp. And I remember seeing that mountain on the right for the first time in the distance and thinking to myself, whoa, what are these feelings that I'm having? And it's the feelings that I'm describing right now. I'm not exactly able to articulate them, other than I loved how it made me feel to be so small in the world. And I think as a 21-year-old, and now especially as a lot of you guys are mega successful, it's easy to feel like we are the Don Juan. It's easy to feel like Mr. Machismo when you're running things in the workplace. and we lose perspective of where we are in the universe. And I think if anybody has like seen a big wave, or maybe if you've traveled to the Rockies or the Andes or the Himalayas, you can be in certain places in nature, or if you've ever been scuba diving and really feel, well, actually, I give you an even easier one. If you've ever been on an airplane and you look down, you can see really how big everything is and how small you are in it. And that feeling really provoked something inside of me. And I say that to you guys to set the stage on a quote that I recently heard Tom Ferry quote Tim Ferriss. So Tom Ferry recently shared this Tim Ferriss quote that says, "Life punishes the vague and rewards the specific task." Life punishes the vague and rewards the specific task. And I think that is very significant in applying to our business, and really significant in applying to climbing big mountains, because they are not all built the same. What I mean by that is there are 14 8,000 meter peaks in the world, 14 mountains that are bigger than 26,000 feet. And just because they all fall in that same category doesn't mean that the training is the same, or the training required is the same for each mountain. So when I think back about how I fell in love with Mount Everest, I didn't fall in love with the concept of climbing big mountains. I fell in love with the idea of climbing this mountain. And my journey pushed me to climb this mountain specifically. So the way that I think it applies to everybody in this room, or not the way that I think it applies, the way that it does apply to everybody in this room, is being very specific about whatever it is that you guys are chasing after in 2023. If your goal is to lose weight, and this is not novel, if the goal is to lose weight, how much weight? Specifically to the ounce. If the goal is to sell houses, how many houses? Specifically. You could dial it even further. How many multifamily properties do I want to sell? How many condos do I want to sell? We can focus broadly on houses, but I know that if we are trying to get somewhere and we do not have a clear vision of what it is we're going to, we won't know when we hit that mark, and we won't even know if we're close. And the reason I think it's really important for everyone to have this concept of a target that we're shooting at is not just for those that are like trying to set goals, but I think of myself, I mean this humbly, but I also am confident in my ability. I work hard. I know Nazar works really freaking hard. I know Matt works really hard. There's a lot of people in this room that I know are super hard workers that I might not know personally, but you can identify as a hard worker. The reason why it's so important to be specific about the target that you are shooting at is because many of us are like donkeys without blinders on them. And we will work until our feet are bleeding. I have like an addiction for gummy bears. It's really bad. And I will eat them until my teeth feel like they're going to fall out of my head. I really mean that. My teeth will prevent me from eating them before my stomach or my brain tells me to stop. So for anybody that is out there and they felt like in 2022, you were running, and you are tired, my question would be, did you set the goal in where you were going? If the number was 40 houses, did you really identify what it takes to sell 40 houses and do the work that it takes to get that result, and nothing more and nothing less? I want to maybe I'll give you guys an example, and then I want to share how it applies to the business. But when you're climbing a mountain like Everest, you don't just start at base camp and move your way to the summit. You do it in what's called rotations. And the reason why you'll do something called a rotation is because the altitude is so great that if you go up too quickly, you'll get something called cerebral edema or pulmonary edema. It'll kill you. It's like an air pocket in the brain or an air pocket in the lungs that will kill you. And the only way to avoid it is to go up incrementally and then come back down, allow your body to recover and develop some more red blood cells, and then go back up. I remember very clearly I was doing well on the mountain. I don't know exactly why, other than I had really prepared. God was looking out for me. The weather is going my way, but everything was pushing me to say, you really have this under control. And when you feel like you have things under control is oftentimes when you go off the rails and don't follow the plan. When we're selling houses and we're doing good is when we stop prospecting and doing everything else. So where I'm going with this is I had climbed up to camp 2 for my first rotation. And then I had touched camp 3. The idea is that I went up high, I saw that I could do well, how my body performed, and then I come back to base camp. I wanted to skip a whole week of rotations because I was performing so well. I had no nausea, I had no headaches, my body was recovering. I really thought to myself, I can skip part of the process. I can skip my rotation the second time going up to camp 4 and just go straight for the summit. And it was really contentious with my team because it wasn't the agenda for everybody else. I was really weighing my choices. Do I cut my trip a little bit short to try to make the summit? But really what I came down to deciding is if my goal is specifically to climb Mount Everest, and I know that I know what it takes to get there, why am I suddenly going to change what I've been doing for the past 10 years? Why am I suddenly going to change on like the 90-yard line what my plan is to achieve this goal by trying to save myself a week? And that's really what I want to share with you guys as far as your plan for moving your needle forward is you might think it's okay to get off the rails because the day that you didn't prospect, you met somebody at the grocery store. And of course, that's prospecting. But do not be misled to think that these alterations to the path are in your best interest because it might work once, but if you know that you have a formula for success and Nazar has the formula for your success, stick with it. This is where I think I can get very specific to the business. And this is what I mean as far as being measurable with your goal is it, let me ask you guys that are great at like monitoring tasks and not just tasks, but really like these measurable things. My understanding being in the ecosystem, the number that we're using is about 40 conversations to an escrow. Is that fair? Are you guys using that same metric roughly? So I would guess for really high achievers, it's less than 40. And for those that are just getting started, it's going to be more than 40, right? So the better, pardon?
Closer to 80, depending on the lead source. Yeah.
That's perfect. So I want to use, so with that in mind, we're going to use the calculator for 80 because I was calculating 40, but this is better because I want this to be realistic. We need to be measurable with what we're trying to accomplish. And if we take the guesswork out of it, it's easier to get there. So I'm trying to make selling houses as definable as climbing a mountain. And this isn't a secret, but for anybody that likes climbing, and I know we have a handful here, do you know why it's so sexy? It's because it's easy to wrap our heads around. When life is complicated, when business is complicated, I can point to the top of that mountain and say, that is my goal. That is where I'm going. And I don't have to think about anything else. You need to take the thinking out of what your goals are so you can show up to your desk every morning and do the work that allows you to achieve the goals. So we're going to use the number of 60. So, or I'm sorry, 80. If it takes 80 conversations to open one escrow, how many escrows do we want to open and how many conversations do we have to have and how many days do we have to work to accomplish that? That was a mouthful, but let's do some math for us. I looked up that there are 260 work days in the year. So we're going to use that. I'm not asking you to work holidays. I'm not asking you to work the weekends, but we are going to assume that your lead source takes 80 conversations to transact to one escrow. So we're going to use the number 40 because that's a good number. If you want to sell 40 houses, if I need to sell 40 houses and have 80 conversations to sell one house, that means that I'm having 3,200 conversations to achieve that goal. Is that fair? Am I doing my math right? 80 conversations in escrow. I want to sell 40 houses. That gives me 3,200 conversations. We know that we don't want to work the weekends. We know that we don't want to work holidays. That gives me 260 days that I am planning to show up, because all of this is in anticipation of what you're trying to do to have the best 2023 possible. So if I take 3,200 contacts divided by 260, it's 12.3 conversations a day. Am I doing the math wrong?
I would actually do the math based on 20 days a month and only working 11 months out of the year. Just because I think if you really calculate all of the stuff, and I don't know if that equates to the same number that you came up with. I don't think it does, just because when I did my math,
How
it
many?
was 14, it was 14 and a half conversations a day.
That's perfect.
Oh,
That's perfect. The point that Nazar is like drawing upon, that I want you guys to embrace, is that you don't show up to call. You don't show up with this amorphous idea of like, I'm going to sell houses. If you do the 15, the numbers provide that you will hit the goals. And we'll kind of get to doing the work and the persistence. But the point that I'm making specifically in setting the measurable goals is just that. They are measurable, very specifically measurable. And if you don't know with specificity how many houses you plan to sell next year, if you don't know exactly how much weight you plan to lose next year, or if you want to climb a mountain, what mountain you plan to climb next year and how you're going to prepare for it, it's never going to happen. You might get close. You might go past it and then feel unsatisfied because you never had the satisfaction because you didn't know what the target was. But we have to be very analytical about where we're going so we can measure what it takes to get there and be satisfied when we get there. I kind of had this like later, but one thing that I'm realizing is I use my iPhone notepad to take notes, and I put my to-do list on there. And instead of putting a line through it or a check, I delete it. And what I'm learning about deleting it is, yeah, it makes my note smaller, but the problem is, because I can't see what I accomplished and I can only see what I have left to do, it's really messing with my head. And it makes me feel like I'm not accomplishing a lot. So think about what it is that you guys are accomplishing, or what it is specifically that you're trying to accomplish, and make that the micro task every single day. And that has to be non-negotiable. So, okay. The last thing before we move past goals, I was just looking at my notes. This is big when it comes to what your goal is. This is actually like massive. This might be the biggest thing of my presentation. We all want to be super successful. Like, I want to be Nazar, right? I want to have like this big brokerage. I want to be selling all these houses, the king of Batesville. All of us want the success. We want to be Tom Ferry. We want to be Ryan Serhant. What I don't think many of us are asking ourselves or really thinking about is, am I willing to do the work that it requires to achieve that goal? So now that you've measured it, now we know we have to make 15 conversations a day. Now we take a step back and say, am I prepared to be on the phone for 3 hours a day? Or however long it's going to take you to get to the 15. But it's not going to be quick, and it's not going to be easy. And any of these goals, I was on Everest for 2 months. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. So really what you have to ask yourself before we move to step 2, do I understand the work that it's going to take to get to this goal? Is my family aware of what my goal is and how it's going to take me away from it? And that was huge when it came to something like Mount Everest, because I was training 2 times a day, 3 times a day as it was getting closer leading up to it. Even when I was present at dinner with my family, my mind was somewhere else. If your colleagues and your family and the group that you believe supports you do not know where your focus is, it's going to be very challenging to hit these numbers. It's going to be very challenging to get where you want to go. So before we go to like lesson 2, wrap your head around what it is you want. Look at the people that you admire. look past their social media, maybe have a conversation with them, and identify what it looks like behind the scenes and be okay with the effort it's going to take. Because I kid you not, there are so many people that successfully climb Mount Everest and their experience is so grossly different than mine. And the reason is they hated the process. And I think part of the reason they hated the process is because the shiny escrow or the summit picture at the end of the day is just not enough to keep you moving forward. It's just not enough. The escrow check gets cashed and it just doesn't mean that much anymore. So really ask yourself, what kind of work is it going to take? And am I willing to put in that work? Okay. The prep. So prep is a big thing. I think prep is also a dangerous thing because some people can get paralyzed. What is it, like paralysis by analysis? It's like you prepare, but you never get started. I'm not talking about that situation. I'm not talking about preparing so much that you don't get started. What I'm talking about is preparing before you get started. So day one isn't preparation. Day one is really day one. So I had been training to climb Mount Everest for about, I had been training to climb Everest for about 10 years. And these photos are me in the Andes. But when I was getting ready to climb Everest, I didn't just say, hey, we're going to climb Mount Everest one day. I was doing a lot to sort of get myself ready for it. And one of the ways that I was getting myself ready for it as it was getting closer was to experience how I would perform in high altitude in the big mountains. So I took a trip to the Andes. I took a trip to Bolivia. It's called the Cordillera Real, to climb to see how I would perform above 6,000 meters or 21,000 feet. And the reason I'm sharing that with you is because this trip was part of my preparation for Everest. Before I left to do this trip in July of 2021, I had started putting in the effort in January of that same year, getting ready for it. So there is like 9 months of physical prep that were going into this climb. Once I went and did the Andes, I really had to like analyze what's it going to take to raise the stakes a little bit. I'll play this video and you guys can get an idea of some of this. Oh. This is give you an idea of just some of like what some of the climbing looked like. So it's like a little narrow ridge. The goal wasn't to climb in the Andes. The goal was to climb Mount Everest, and the Andes was part of my preparation to get there. When I got back from the Andes, the question was, how could I be even more prepared for Mount Everest? How could I even be more in a position to succeed? So what I did was get really analytical with the science. This is me in like one of those VO2 lactic threshold tests where they attach you to one of those machines and you're doing all the stuff to get your VO2 max, you're getting your lactic threshold, you're getting really analytical into how you can prepare. So it's almost like preparing to prepare, if that makes any sense. So I went to this place in Santa Monica. It was like a physiology center with these sports doctors, and they do these tests. And the reason why I'm saying this to you guys is, or the reason why I'm showing this to you guys is because January 1st or December 1st, or everyone likes to have a target date, but that date that you intend to get started is not the day that you should start putting together the plan. That's the day that you hit the ground running. So these are pictures of me in the process. Every Sunday, I would train with a 70-pound weight vest. It was 62 pounds. It was about 40% of my body weight. And I would hike like 18 miles. This is an example of one of them. I don't know how many miles this one was. This was like an 8-hour workout, 8,000 feet of elevation. It doesn't, oh, that one was 21 miles. My point is, the more we prepare before we get started, the better that start is going to be. So where I'm going with it for you guys specifically is between now and the end of the year is the opportunity to start the preparation that allows you to begin January 1st really, really strong. What do I mean by that? When you sit down to make calls, when it's time to prospect, it's not the time to look for the numbers to call. When you sit down or when you get in the car and decide you're going to door knock, that's not the time to figure out what neighborhood you're going to. And that might sound obvious, but I know it's like what a lot of us are doing, because it's like, all right, 9 o'clock, it's time for me to get my butt in the chair, your butt's in the chair, but you really don't know what you're doing at that point. That's where the preparation and the time blocking come in. So none of this is novel. If you're not putting it on your calendar when you are doing some of these actions, they are just never going to happen, period. Like, we wonder what got us the results in 2021 and what it would take to get to 2022. We wonder what we did in 2022 to get these results, but we want more in 2023. The same thing you're doing is probably not going to be the ticket. I think preparing is a big piece of this, and time blocking is really a chunk of it. The way that you guys put listing appointments on your calendar is the same exact way that we have to put prospecting on the calendar, non-negotiably. And the trouble is, for the last few years, we've kind of been order takers. We've been like drive-through line at McDonald's, where we can just turn and burn these orders with buyers and sellers because the demand was so high. And now we are quickly realizing that we don't have the skills that we used to have, or we forgot about the skills that we once cultivated to have meaningful conversations with people. And that's where I really would say, and this is where rubber hits the road, as far as this is my second practical tip that I have. So the first one, if you guys don't remember, pick how many houses you want to sell. Use 80 conversations as the metric and figure out exactly how many conversations you need to have every single day. It seems so easy. I would guess that most people on this Zoom don't have that number. Step 2 is being surgical with where you are with your time. My wife is a plastic surgeon, and what I've learned about surgeons and other professionals is that they get paid to do one thing: cut. They don't set up the room. They don't put on their own gloves. They cut. My question to you is, what do you have on your calendar that is paying you to cut, not to get ready to cut? Because you're not billing for that. So is it on the calendar to prospect, making the calls? And I already mentioned not getting ready to make the calls, but you're prepared when you sit down to make the calls. The second thing that I would say is, do you have on the calendar when you're role playing? Nobody was role playing. Actually, I take that back. The people that are really, really crushing it to the highest degrees, I think, have not wavered on these disciplines, even when the market was as hot as it was during COVID. I'm going to repeat that again. I've gone to, I think, every big TF event in the past 4 years. The market was super hot. Every time I'm around the Tim Smiths, the Nazars, all these people, everybody seems to still be doing what they were doing before the market was so hot. They still make the calls. They're still role playing. They're still dialing in these practices that you need when the economy isn't just throwing these people at you. I'm not asking you to climb Mount Everest of role playing. I'm asking you to climb the baby hill. That means maybe role playing 15 minutes, 2 days a week to get started. But put it on your calendar, non-negotiably. Because if you put it there, it will happen. And if you didn't put it there and you wonder why you didn't role play this year, the answer is on your calendar. And I've kind of touched on this, but I want to reiterate how important this last piece is. Being busy does not mean that you're being productive. And when I was practicing law, we got to bill by the hour. And you don't get to bill for sharpening your pencil. You don't get to bill when you turn on the lights. You get to bill when you're doing the work. So ask yourself, if somebody was billing you, or if you were paying yourself, would you be paying yourself for the time that you're getting ready to do the work? One thing I've really recognized is that People that run their own business often forget, and this is agents, we're all our own business people, even though we're on a team, right? You are your own business. We all forget what it was like when we were once employed. And if you can think back to the last time that you had a job, 4:30 comes around and you're kind of mentally checked out, but you're not allowed to leave. You find a way to put in another hour and a half of work until you can clock out. You find a way to do something productive. And what I would really urge you to think about in your own days is when it's 4:30, and in any other circumstance, if you were on somebody else's clock, you would still have to have your ass in the chair. What are you doing at that moment? What are you doing, really? Because the trouble is, as being these entrepreneurs and independent business people, it's like, I can run my own schedule. I can do this, I can do that. But the problem is we are so free, we are so independent that like we don't realize that freedom is really costing us something. And that's not easy to do. But I would challenge you to exercise that muscle today, that when 4 o'clock is on the calendar or 4:30 is on the calendar, what more can you squeeze out? And I understand that you're your own boss, but treat yourself like an employee every once in a while and force yourself to continue to show up. Because I think that's a place that a lot of us sort of struggle, is to continue to show up when you think we don't have to, when you think the rules don't apply to you. And that's really where I think we get caught with our pants down. Right. This is my last lesson. So this is like one thing that really resonated with some people when I was, this is one thing that I've said recently that has resonated with some people. And it's this idea of being in the mood to do something. And what I have here is F your mood, fuck your mood. And you're like, what does that mean exactly? I think a lot of people would look at like the mats. The reason I keep calling on you guys is because I can only see like 3 faces with my monitor. So there's a lot of people out here that are crushing, but I'm looking at them, which is why I'm using their names. When you look at certain people, you think to yourself, man, how do they do it? They're always on. They're always on. They're always working. They always have a smile on their face. They're always able to serve the client. They're always managing to like save the escrows when they're blowing up. How do they do it? They're always like in the mood to be doing this thing. And I think that's like the funny thing about this idea about top performers or really successful people, is like they're always in the mood to be doing the work. And that right there, I think, is the biggest mind shift that we need to like move away from. Is what I've learned is that highly successful people are not always in the mood to do the work. What they have the ability to do is force themselves to do the work and allow the mood to come amongst them, to come upon them. Does that make sense? When I got to Everest Base Camp, and I can find this video, but I don't want to dig it up. When I got to Everest Base Camp, this is before the real climbing begins. We sat down in a room. The lead guide is in front of the table, and he sits everybody down. And at this point, it's only Everest climbers, and I think there was a couple trekkers left. And he sits down, and he's standing, and the rest of us are sitting. And I remember thinking, like, this doesn't feel like something's going on. He says, guys, one of our Sherpas just died. First day, we just lost a Sherpa. He was moving stuff up to camp 2. He sat down, and he didn't get up again. And it really shook me. It really shook me, because I'm here to have a lot of fun. I'm here to climb this goal. And then you get sobered very quickly, because it's like, wow, somebody just died. And everybody knows that's a reality. The Sherpas know it's a reality. The climbers know it's a reality. But like, things don't feel that real until you're seriously right in front of it, seeing a body or hearing about this body. So it really shook me. And needless to say, I didn't have much desire to climb. It left a terrible taste in my mouth. I felt like I was abusing the system. But I see the Sherpas continue to move with the show. And I see that when the Sherpas are out climbing, doing what they enjoy doing, they have a smile back on their face. I'm not saying they forget their colleague. Nobody forgets Nima that passed away. But when they are doing things that provide them satisfaction, even though it might not provide them satisfaction in the beginning, that exercise of showing up allows them to enjoy what they're doing, even though when they started, it sucked. If anybody has gone hiking or anybody has done anything that requires an alpine start, you have to leave to get to the summit in the middle of the dark. And the reason why you always leave in the middle of the dark is because it takes all day to get to the top. And I don't care if you are Bear Grylls. Nobody wants to get out of the tent at midnight when it's cold outside. Nobody. Nobody wants to put on the boots. Nobody wants to start climbing because it sucks and it's cold. But what I've learned being on Everest is that it's okay for it to suck for the first few hours. It's okay for it to suck even for the first few days. But when you are in the motion of doing that work, the suck begins to suck a lot less. And the mood that you need to be in to be successful suddenly becomes the mood that you're embodying. The problem is we don't allow ourselves to put our butts in the chair to be uncomfortable long enough to put ourselves in the mood. And that's really what I want you guys to think about when you sit down to prospect, or when you sit down and you think about making content. It's okay that you don't want to make the content. That's all good. It's all good. If it was easy, everybody would be making it. If everybody was in the mood to be doing it, everybody would be doing it. But you have to push past that few minutes of resistance, that 30 minutes of discomfort while you're looking at the video, and just do it. And I promise you, the next one gets easier, and the next one gets easier. And it might not get easier on the second or third try, but with these daily disciplines of just putting one foot in front of another, it will get easier. And I know for a fact that anybody that has stopped video and started prospecting and stopped, you didn't do it long enough to put yourself in the mood to do it, period. And I'm not asking for anybody to tell me how long they've done it, but really ask yourself. And if you've done it for a couple of days, it's not long enough. If you've done it for a week, it's not long enough. How many days do they say it takes to build a habit? 21? Something like that, 14? I'll tell you what it is. If you're only prospecting for 2 hours a day, do you think that it's going to build the habit in a week? You've only done it for 14 hours. Are you going to be a master at it? Absolutely not. So lean into that. Only because we're running on time. Or are we way over time? I can cut it now. I had some final thoughts. I feel like I've gone so long.
Those that need to jump off, they can jump off. You can finish your thoughts.
So really, the final thoughts that I have for you guys, I want you to walk away with knowing how many houses you want to sell, how long you need to prospect for. I want you to walk away with this idea that you do the work and it puts you in the mood. That's huge. That really is the biggest piece. The preparation is massive. When you show up to do the work, don't show up to get prepared. And then the final things that I want to share with you guys, and this is where this might bother some people, but for like the warriors in the room, which I want to believe a lot of agents are, I need you to put your warrior hat on right now. Our competition is not Jeff Bezos. Our competition is not Mark Zuckerberg. It's not Elon Musk. Our competition, respectfully, is ourselves. Our competition is the guy next to me who is just as anxious about where the market is going, who's just as nervous about what he's seeing on the news. If we can look at ourselves as being commiserate with our colleagues feeling this struggle, I'm not asking you to outrun the bear. I'm asking you to outrun the guy next to you. And that is some sort of competition mentality. Everybody is going through the same struggle. The question is, can you persevere longer than that person next to you? Because a lot of us are already falling by the wayside, and it's only just beginning. It's really only just beginning. And the final thing that I would leave you guys with is this like shifting market, right? Everyone's talking about this market shift. It's okay to do 50% more work, knowing that you're going to get 25% of the result you got last time. When you find peace in what your big picture process is. And I'm going to say that one more time. I recently heard somebody say, you're going to do 50% more work to get 25% less result. And I was like, I don't like that. That makes me upset. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to say the economy is going to dictate how my business operates. Blah, 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 blah. And then I kind of pulled back those layers and what my goal is in this business. And am I going anywhere in a year? Am I going anywhere with 2 years? With winter coming and whatever everybody is saying, are you in this for 2023, 2024, 2025, infinity and beyond? Or are you in this for the next 6 months, And if anybody, and I'm assuming most of you guys are in here for the long haul, the work, and this is how you can handle that phrase, that 25% less result that you're getting doesn't mean that the 50% of effort you're putting in is squandered into the ethos. It means that effort you're putting in is delaying the gratification that you're going to get in 2024. It's delaying that success that you're going to have in 2025. I'm not saying you're not selling a buttload of houses in the meantime, but what I'm saying is this friction that you're having is going to pay down the road. And anybody that has been very successful in real estate knows that this is a delayed gratification game. And I think now, especially with young agents who haven't seen that delay, because it's like, let me make a call and I'm going to sell a house, is quickly realizing that this takes time. So I appreciate you guys being so patient. I'm like way over time, but that's it. I'm Krys Benjamin, and thanks for having me.
Krys, thank you so much for sharing all of that. When you talked about Bear Grylls, reminded me of a funny experience I'd had. He's 19 years old now, but at the time he was like 14 years old or 15 years old. And we were at some dinner and I just was asking questions. And the question I asked was, I said, if you were stranded on an island and you could only have one person with you, who would that be? And he said, Bear I heard was Bear Girls, like he won't have her naked on the and so I thought it was really funny. He's like, no, Dad, I'm not saying Bear Girls. I'm saying Bear Girls, the guy that's like, that would help me out.
I love it. If I was alone on an island and I wasn't going to make it,
Okay.
I might want some bare naked women as well.
Right. That's right. So anyway, I just thought about it when you mentioned him again. But thank you so much. I think the only thing I would add to what everything Krys said was those individuals, and every single one of us, is in this camp. If we are not intentional, like imagine going to the grocery store, or imagine if I put you in a professional kitchen with all the food behind your disposal, and I said, all right, go. Something. Like you might be stuck, you might not know what to do, you might not, right? But if I make me and you just follow the simple steps, you'll get the results that you want. Real estate is no different. You got to take the mystery out of the equation and just have it be, I do these things and this is the results I get. And I think I love how Krys broke it down, just super simple. You make your 14 contacts, you make your 15 contacts every single day and be relentless about making sure that happens, and nothing stops you from making that work, then the rest of it will just fall into place. The rest of the dominoes will just naturally fall if you do that one very simple, very very like not complicated thing. Just talk to 15 people that you've never spoken to before every freaking day you're working and ask them if they want to buy, sell, or invest in real estate. And if you do that, you will win this game long term. It's all about the long term. It's not like what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day. Like you're building these opportunities. Right now, you guys, if you've been in the business for over 15, 17 years like me, like people call me all the time, from 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Hey, Nazar, we're ready to sell a house. Hey, Nazar, we want to buy a home. Like those conversations can only have if you are constantly working. And in the beginning, you got to hustle. And back in 2006, 7, 8, holy crap, man, you had to work 3 times as hard to be able to make the same amount of money that you normally made in 2000, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is that time. Winter's coming. Winter has come. And here we are. Like the wheat and the tares are going to be very, very easily separated right now. Either you're going to survive barely, or you're going to thrive, or you might not survive, right? I guess those are the 3 options. And so which camp do you want to be in? Do you want to be you're going to be working at McDonald's in the next 6 months? Do you want to be in the camp where you are just barely making it, or are you going to thrive in this environment? And I'm confident, and I promise you that you could thrive if you want to, even in this economic situation that we're currently in. Anyway, thank you again, Krys.
Thanks, guys,
for your time.
Absolutely amazing, Krys. Thank you so much.
You guys are all so sweet.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
If
you.
you guys ever need anything, shoot me a DM. I'm always here for y'all. And thanks again. Good to see you guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Krys. Talk to you guys next week.